Hello and welcome to No Wrong Choices, a podcast about the adventures of life that explores the career journeys of successful and interesting people. I'm Larry Samuels, soon to be joined by the other fellas, Tushar Saxena and Larry Shea. If you've been enjoying our show, please support us by following us on your favorite podcasting platform and by giving us a 5-star rating. You can also look for us on social media by searching for No Wrong Choices, and to learn more about us, please visit our website at NoWrongChoices.com. This episode is part 2 of our conversation with voiceover artist, director, and coach Shelly Shenoy. Part 1 focused on the journey up to her first audition. We'll now learn about how she broke into the business, which is a really fun story. Larry Shea is the resident disciple of Shelly. You are once again the right person to lead us into this discussion.
Yeah, let the auditioning begin, I think, is the best way to start this episode because, I really admire her patience that she had to get her footing in New York City, and we heard a lot about that in part 1 of this interview. And in part 2, she's finally ready to break through and network and become that business, right? I think we're about to hear some exciting stories about her big break. I won't give it away, but I think you want to stay tuned because there's a lot of great stories here about how she broke in, how she did it, who she knew, when she knew them, and why it was important that these relationships took place. So I'm excited about it for sure.
I think a lot what we'll learn about in part 2 is disappointment is a relative term when it comes to Shelly Shenoy, right? So she might go out for one role, get rejected for it, but it turns out that the producer's like, you know what? I think you'd actually be better for this second role that you have. What do you think about that? And then, obviously, the name of part 1 was Just Say Yes. So, yeah, a lot of her is just saying yes to that next role. So, I mean, look, Shelly Shenoy knows what she's doing. She is absolutely a pro's pro. She is a lot of fun.
Without a doubt. And I guess the cliffhanger that I will leave out there is that Shelly is a great Courtney Love. Stay tuned for more. We pick things up with Larry Shea pivoting the conversation towards Shelly's early auditioning process.
So that allowed you to get your footing. And an audition here or there? How did that begin?
Yeah, so I started meeting people. I started auditioning for local theater things and just started to really do it. And
I mean, you're a networker, right? I mean, this is what you do.
And there was no online. I didn't even have a computer, there was nothing online. It was all networking. Right. And so I was meeting people, auditioning for shows and gigs.
Where'd you get those? Village Voice? What are you looking at?
It was more through people I'm waitressing at this place and I know this person and they're doing, comedy gigs here and maybe talk to them. And then some of it was newspaper stuff, find it in backstage. Sure. And so it was a combo of networking and looking things up. Mm-hmm. And I ended up, I did a couple local theater shows and stuff like that. But what I ended up really launching into was, I joined, sort of co-created and joined an all-female sketch comedy troupe called The Brothel. And we started doing shows all over the city.
Wow.
And we started taking off. And that was what ended up knocking on the door of the voiceover world.
So then, great transition. So what was your first voiceover gig? And how did your time with The Brothel then lead to the voiceover work?
Fascinating. So I got to meet a ton of New York City comics, and some of the male comics were making it with agents. I didn't have an agent yet. It took me years to get an agent. They had agents. They were doing voiceover work. It was wow, they're doing commercial gigs. They're actually making money. Meanwhile, the rest of the lot of us were just a bunch of broke comedians that all knew each other and we're all trying to make it. And what ended up happening was a bunch of theater, comedic groups, comedy tropes, were hired by one producer. We were one of them to do a show for MTV. And the show was a behind the scenes producers and original MTV VJ roast.
Oh, wow.
And it was a live performance. This was before roasts were televised. And so it was a live comedic roast of original producers and original VJs. And so that, somebody was like, oh, the girls from the brothel, they got to be in this, and da-da-da-da-da. Somebody was putting this all together. And I, so we all get there. We had like a day to put our stuff together, and then the next day was the show. And so on the first day where we were just kind of mapping everything out, how this roast was going to go, I was pointed at by one of the senior comics who had seen a handful of the brothel shows, and he pointed right at me and he goes, you're gonna roast Courtney Love.
Oh wow.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
And I was like, what the fuck? Like, roast Courtney Love? Like, hey, I'm a sketch artist. I've done a little bit of stand up, but like, I wasn't. How the hell do you roast Courtney Love?
There's some material there.
And
anyway.
I'm just,
I was thinking you got something to work with.
But I'm sitting there and I'm like racking my brain, and it was late that night when I still had nothing. And I like shot out of bed and I knew that I had it. The only way to truly roast Courtney Love is to show up at the roast as Courtney Love.
Yes.
And that's exactly what I did. Okay, now, to be fair, I did not know that Courtney Love was actually going to be there.
Oh, wow.
She was, I mean, everybody there, this place was packed. And I did Courtney, like, I was like, like, I just did all the, like, motherfuckers, like, all the stuff where it was just like, wow! She's just screaming and drunk and doing all this. And she was laughing. She was cackling. She was laughing harder than anybody, right? So I was like, my work here is done. Drop the mic. I'm good, And someone approached me after the show. He walked up to me and he said, so, hey, he introduced himself. He goes, so you're a voiceover artist. And I went, this is exactly what I said. Oh, yeah. No, I wish. I mean, I heard that those guys can pay their rent. And he goes, no. That wasn't a question.
Mm-hmm.
And
interesting.
Yeah. And then he goes, do you know who and he introduced like himself as his career. And he was like, I work with Lucasfilms. I do all the video games. I was like, oh, you're one of the guys that I heard about. You are killing it in this industry. And he was like, I am. And he was like, yeah, but you've got it. You've got it. He was like, let's exchange numbers. Let's become friends. And whenever I see something that's right for you, I'll try to get you in the door.
What an amazing connection.
Yeah, we actually became friends, and he got me in the door of my very first audition.
We always, these moments come up all the time. I mean, what a pivotal moment that he was there, he saw you, that you had the idea, and all the things that had to come together. And look, it opened up your whole world. So what's next? Did you start going to auditions? You have your foot in the door now. He's making recommendations for you. How does that work?
Oh, so what happened was he called me one day and he goes, he was like, hey, I've got this thing. I've got an idea and I think you're going to be perfect for it. It was something that I was auditioning for a different part of, but they're doing an audition and there's a princess there. Can you do a princess voice? Like, is that something that you think you can do? And on the phone, I was like, well, hello, little birds. Oh, my. And I was like, I does that sound like a princess to you? And he was like, fuck yeah. I was like, okay. And so I go the next day to this audition. I'm in the voiceover studio. This was the first time I experienced what happens when you're looking at producers on the other side of the window that are talking about you but not pressing the talk back button. That was my first experience. So like I get the script, right? It was to audition for Princess Zara to be the voice of the doll. So a doll was being sold in Great Britain and South Africa of this princess, and the DVD, see how long ago this was? The DVD being sold, the DVD cartoon of her life story came with the doll in the box. So they needed to have this animated life story of her. So I was auditioning for Princess Zara. And so they gave me the script and I did my hello little birds voice, and they're just looking at me like, nope, through the window, and they're talking about me. And I was just like, ugh. And then the producer, Frank Drucker, the producer, presses the button and he goes, so listen, we heard that you can do anything. So we're wondering if we threw a couple other scripts at you, if you would want to take a stab at them. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. So he throws a bunch of other things at me, and I just kept reading for whatever it was. And 3 days later, they called me and they said, hey, we're calling from the Princess Zara gig. They didn't say gig, but and we just wanted to let you know that you did not book Princess Zara. And I was like, oh, okay. Wow, you really do call people and tell them no. Like this really does happen in New York.
Nicer business than I ever thought.
Yeah, like, oh wow, okay. And she goes, but you did book her mother, her grandmother, her sister, her brother, her handmaiden, and 2 of her kidnappers.
Oh my God. Wow.
But you booked the rest of the script.
Yeah, I booked 7 roles in the cartoon, and when I showed up on day 1, you learn that all of the characters were African, and there was an African dialect coach there.
Oh my goodness.
And they needed the timbre. They wanted the timbre of my voice and the versatility of all the different characters that I could do, because I was saving them hours of time and casting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right.
And so they had this dialect coach there for me, and it was an earth-shattering experience for me. I had never had more fun in my life, and they paid me per character.
Oh my
Oh,
goodness.
wow.
Yeah.
So
the lottery.
Like, come on. Like, my very first voiceover job, no one's judging you. It's a safe place. They're telling you to just wing it and just do your thing. I felt totally like I was in my zone, and then I got to perform it and just live the dream. And then they sent me money. Like, good money. Like, a great check.
I'm so glad you just talked about letting you do your thing, because I want to get back to your career and the arc, but this is important because I'm sure people listening to this podcast right now are told hey, you have a great voice, you should do voiceover. Hey, you know, oh, I love your voice. Oh, what a deep voice. What a nice voice, pretty voice.
Yeah.
And that's not what this is. Like, when I took lessons from you, the thing that I would remember, and it always stuck with me, is when I watched you work, your acting was such a part of it. Your mind, your creativity was you embodied these characters. And that for me was always just a leap that as a mere mortal, I couldn't make, I could do announcer voice till the cows came home, but to be 7 characters in an animation or a video game, I mean, that's what you have to do, correct?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, 100%. So how do you, I guess it was just you were on stage your whole life. Your acting training really prepared you for this pinnacle moment in your life to get in that booth and just wing it and have fun, essentially.
Well, but here's the thing, though. Yes, everything you're saying is true. But the real thing, the real place where I felt like I was elbowing my way into a career somehow was my brothers. I was raised in the 80s and 90s with 3 older brothers who were, from the 80s and 90s place. And these 3 clowns, it was competing against the fastest improvisers I had ever known in my life, because they're all hilarious. And so is my sister. And so the edginess of like having to be such a fast thinker, and then and the surprises was like, it was nothing out of the norm at dinner in my family for somebody to be like, could you pass the potatoes? And it was just like, and then nobody talks about it. And I'm like, oh yeah, sure. And like, you're just trying to get a laugh.
That's life training. I mean, that is.
And it was life
training. You've been doing improv for decades at that point.
That's exactly right. And it was just quick thinking and throwing it out there. And my brothers would say, no, you can take that further, And like, so I'd be like, how could you pass the potatoes? God,
so they were your first acting coaches. They were your first acting coaches.
Oh yeah, they were the dream team of comedy, and I had to make them laugh in order to know. Like, there was no like make your girlfriends laugh like in the 80s or not. No. You had to make 3 teenage boys that were the most popular kids in school. They were my brothers, and my daily role in my family was like, who can I get? I got a surprise. I got a funny one. I got a good one. And I would be slammed if it wasn't and praised if it was, and then we all move on.
Wow.
Wow.
It's really that.
So you pull off this unbelievable performance. I assume you've now thrown open the door to the industry. What happens next? Like, what does this set you up for, and where do you head?
That's a great question. So I had nothing. I had my friend in the voiceover industry. I still couldn't get an agent or any reps to call me back. I didn't have any representation. So there was no auditions to be had. All auditions at the time came through. There were no online platforms. It all came through an agent. And so what actually ended up happening was that producer called me 3 months later. And he said, "Hey, Shelly, listen, I'm wondering if you can voice a boy, if you can do the voice of a little boy." And immediately, you know where I come from, man. You know my answer is like, yeah, of course. Like in my mind, I'm like, no. Like I've
name
never
a boy,
even
I can
thought
do it.
about it. Yeah.
What nationality is it?
Yeah, forget it. Like I had never thought about this in my life. But the only thing in my mind was, I've seen The Simpsons. Like I know that Bart's a girl. Of course I can do a boy. Like and I hadn't yet learned how to properly do a boy's voice, but I was like, I can try. And so of course my answer is going to be yes. So he goes, okay, so we're doing a 9-part DVD series for Hooked on Phonics that is going to be sold in every Kmart. And there's a segment on one of the DVDs called Aaron Knows Everything. And we want you to come in and audition for Aaron. And so I'm like, okay, the audition was like in a day or two. I show up to the audition thinking fully it's going to be a room full of women because obviously, right? And it was... there were no less than 25 8-year-old boys in the waiting room.
Oh my God.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Not a single
And
adult
you.
girl. Yeah. And me. I'm like 20 years old. I'm sitting in there like, no, you got to be fucking kidding me. Right. But immediately I just start listening like to the kids, like, hey, Dad. You know, just like stuff where you're just listening to them, talking to their parents, talking about the role, talking about their day, reading the lines, and just listening to their inflections and their pacing and their tonality and all of this. And I didn't know exactly how to capture the tone back then, but what I did know was how to do the performance. And so I walked in. They auditioned me for Aaron. I did the audition. Then they had me read for a couple of other things, you know, just because they knew me from Zara. So they were like, oh, try this. And I left. And 3 days later, they called me and they said, hey, Shelly, we just wanted to let you know you did not book the role of Aaron in Hooked on Fire. I'm like, what is the deal with you guys? But they go, but we're wondering if we can pay you full price to come back and coach the 11-year-old girl that booked the role. It's just that her voice was better, but we want her to do everything you did in your otherwise flawless audition.
Wow. Interesting.
And
Wow.
I was like, and without a second of a hesitation, I went, absolutely.
Because you're a teacher.
Because I knew, I was like, yo, I'm a teacher.
Yeah, but you're a teacher.
And a
Knew
doctor.
it. I
and
knew
a poet.
it. And so, and then they said, oh, and by the way, you booked the narrator on all 9 DVDs. And I was like, there it is.
Wow. Oh, wow.
There it is. And so I did. So I was like, okay. So they had me come in. They scheduled me for 2 hours with the kid. And we were wrapped in 28 minutes.
Wow.
And I'm telling you, though, like without sounding like a dingleberry, I had no idea that, like, it never crossed my mind that I had a niche here, that I had something. It was turning around and looking at the faces of the producers in the audio area just outside of the booth through the glass windows when one of them said, I believe that's a wrap. And I turned around, I was like, oh, cool, you know, high five the kid. They had me scheduled for it was like 2 hours and change, and we were done. It was like 27 minutes total. And I turned around and I looked at their faces, and they were like just staring at me. And I was like, oh, I wonder if, maybe there's something here, you know? And then that was it. And then it was just, you know, so my second voiceover booking ever was my first directing gig ever.
Oh my goodness, Shelly.
So
All
yeah.
right, so
yeah.
Shell, I want to ask: is that part of the deal? Is that whenever someone calls for a job, look, I don't think it probably goes for everybody, but has that been your attitude always? That whenever you're offered a job, no matter how menial it is or how big it is, the answer is yes. Always do the job.
at the beginning, maybe, because there are caveats to this, Larry. Like, for real, you got to be careful, right? You don't want to be taken advantage of. But like, if, you don't want to say like, yeah, I'll do an audiobook for $500. You're going to get killed. Right. Because it's going to be 3 months of work if you've never done this before. Right. So yes, there are caveats to it. You've got to know the industry. You've got to know that this is going to be a worth it. Yes. Because if it's like somebody's paying you, $50 to read a sentence, absolutely do it. At the very beginning, like, sure, yeah, how long is it going to take you to read the sentence? Like, take these little gigs. Don't get taken advantage of. You take advantage of the opportunities that are coming to you and start building from there.
All right, so this is Tushar again.
Yeah. Oh,
how do you know not to take it? No, that's all right. How do you know not to be taken advantage? How do you know how not to be taken advantage of?
Well, I'll tell you, not Larry.
He's the one.
So, the best way, so I like the NYCVO coach, like this coaching thing that I sort of created where I end up being a mentor to people. It's the answer that I give to all of them. It's experience and education. Right? So you've got to have a mentor or an educator who knows the industry backwards and forwards, who can advise you on whether to say yes or no to gigs like that. And the other way is by looking at the gigs themselves and you compare and contrast all of them, right? Like, okay, the majority of these gigs are around this long, will be used in this location, roughly, like whatever media forum it is, and will take this long to record, and they all pay around this much. You start to pick up on norms. But like, if like somebody asks you to read the tagline of a Trident commercial, well, this is a household name brand and you're saying it's for a national spot and they're going to give me $1. Fuck you. Wait, so like you start to piece together what name brands mean, what the media usage means, how much they're asking you to do, how long it's going to take you to do it. And you start putting them all together. So it's experience and education because it does help to have a mentor at the start. Does that make sense, Tushar?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That makes a lot of sense. I guess I want to ask about your instrument and your process. Like, you're saying yes to things that you don't necessarily know that you can do, but you must be, practicing, shredding, doing what you need to do to get there. It's going to be different for everyone. It sounds like you had a world career building up to it and it comes easy for you. What do you recommend for people it doesn't come easy for? And how do you take care of your instrument? I mean, we all wake up with, gurgly voice certain days. Like, how do you get through all that? That's an occupational hazard for someone like you.
Oh, that's so I get asked a lot of asked this a lot by new students. Like when I'm doing a career counseling session with somebody, they're like, how do you do your day?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so the best way to answer your exact question is by walking you through my morning, which is in the morning, I sound like a turd. Right? It's just every morning, guys.
Everyone does.
I sound like a hint of sexy turd, right? Where it's just like
sounds like Tushar.
Yeah, like exactly like Tushar, actually. And so it's like I'll be like,
hey,
really
wait
tired.
a second.
I know.
It took you a second.
I just got that.
He's here. He showed up. So like if in the morning, right? Like if it's like, oh, I've got this like scratchiness and like my voice isn't all the way there yet. What I'll do is I'll look through all my auditions due that morning and I'll start with the richer, sleepier reads like anthems, right? You got to know the advertising industry now. So I'll start with like anthemic reads where you're reading and it's just, this is just how I sound when I wake up in the morning, right? There's a lot of scratch. There's a lot of texture, right? Then I move on to the classic commercials where, this weekend, I don't know. Well, like if it's like introducing the spring edition Fearless Flyer from Trader Joe's, from pitted dark sweet cherries and organic pomegranate seeds. So you're going through the classic commercials. You got a little bit more conversational, right? Then I move on from there to the funny ones where my brain's actually awake. I've had a little bit of coffee. My voice is really sharp and I can improv like a beast. And so then I'll do the really silly or the animated last. when my voice is actually warmed up naturally through the process of auditioning every morning. And I'll do the slightly harder, more complicated, but way more fun auditions. I do them last because I'm warmed up via my morning auditions.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
That's brilliant.
Perfect.
Very cool.
Right.
So I guess jumping, forward a little bit, when you look back at your journey thus far, what are, some of the highlight roles? We've talked about how you broke in. We've talked about how you started to get established. What are some of the highlights for you in terms of experiences?
There was a game changer when I booked The Walking Dead. That was a game changer.
The video game you're talking about.
Yeah. It's the video game, The Walking Dead by Telltale Games. I booked a lead role in season 3 of their game. And this was an international success. And for the record, I had no idea I booked a lead. I had no idea. And but I was just like, I'm here kind of a lot. Like nobody tells you, like, by the way, this is a very important role. They're just like, you're Kate. And I was like, okay, great, Kate. Okay, I'm Kate. Right? And then you just show up and you start working, and then you're like, Kate has a lot of lines. Like, I had no idea what was going on here. And then I saw 2 or 3 months into recordings, because I didn't know if like other people had more lines. Like, you figure out who you are, but then you're kind of piecing it together. And then I saw the promo poster and I was like, wow, there's definitely the lead and the other lead, because I knew who they were. And I was like, whoever that character is, that's so cool. They're on the poster. And that was obviously Kate. I had never seen her before. I was like, look at that smoking hot go-getter, and I didn't put it together. Like, this is clearly Kate in the
That's
story.
great.
I had no idea, because I had never was shown what she looked like.
It's amazing they don't tell you how involved you're going to be either, though. That's fascinating.
I know, right? But think about it. They're coming from inside this massive world, and they assume you're already there with them. Right? So like, at no point are they going to sit you down and be like, hey kid, just so you know, you're going to be a star after this role. It's going to be huge. It's not like that. They're like,
Why do they all sound like these old-timey producers?
don't
Why do they
worry
all
about it. Shut your trap. What are you, a Larry?
Perpetually 1948.
I know. Sorry. That's my voice of the day. There's always one for the day.
Voice of the day. I love
This is
it.
the one that keeps showing up today.
By
the way, I have 76 personalities. So I'm just kidding. Hello?
That was a question. How many voices, can you bring to the table? That
Oh
is a
man,
question.
no, I know I said that because I sound like a psycho, because you have these like different voices. No, it's really, there's no way to answer that really, because like you're not keeping track, but there's a different energy, vocal tone, and sort of like a personality that comes through with every gig you do or every audition you do. Every single audition has its own thumbprint of what's being asked for. And so no two, commercial gigs are the same, and no two animation gigs are certainly the same at all, and so it's really, because every gig is so different, every voice and energy and thing that you put in it is so different. So countless, really. It's just like pretty countless. You know what I mean?
I want to ask you a little bit. We want to get into your voice coaching in just a sec, but
Sure.
I do want to kind of stick on your video game voicing. So, which have you found to be more lucrative, doing animated work, being cartoons and whatnot, or doing video games?
Oh, that's a great question. But I wanted to make sure that in my last answer, I sounded like a piece of shit. I sounded like a pure,
You pulled it off. You sounded terrible.
asshole.
Terrible.
I will only answer you if you speak to me as a 1950s, Broadway producer.
Okay,
You'll be a
sorry.
star, kid.
Sorry. I just wanted to make sure you know how many voices there were.
There we go.
Yeah, no. So this is tricky, right? Because in the animation world, there are bits and pieces of bit parts in shows, and there's a lot of non-union animation work. A lot of it is just not union, and there are some gigs that are union. So the union gigs pay a lot better, whether or not you're reoccurring. So it starts off pretty small, but if you book a gig like an international, freight train, like The Walking Dead was, you'll make great money. But in the meantime, as you're working on animated gigs, how I had done so many video games, I didn't make anywhere near what I made in Walking Dead. And Walking Dead was an 8 to 10 month gig.
Wow.
We worked on that thing for a long time. And you do 1 or 2 records a week. They can't have you for more than 4 hours because of vocal stress. We're screaming, we're in wars, we're running and getting attacked by zombies, that kind of stuff. So they can't have you for more than 4 hours.
It sounds exhausting.
It's exhausting.
Let's talk about the coaching. We saw that you pretended to be a teacher, so that's good.
Yeah.
Pretended to be a waiter.
And then
pretended to work in finance.
Pretended, a lot of pretending.
And you gotta fake it till you make it big,
that's
baby.
it. Yeah. And then obviously directing the 8-year-old girl to do the part. I mean, that's kind of your first glimmer into, oh boy, I could do this and I could do it really well. When did you decide to go off on your own, and how did that take place?
Actually, I didn't choose it. I was with management at the time. I was trying to be Tom Cruise, right? Where I was like, I just really want a manager, because everyone in New York had a manager. And I was like, I want one of those. But if you don't have something to manage, don't get a manager involved. Just work with your agent, okay? Mm-hmm. Well, I had an agent and I also had a manager, and the management company that I was with, they were like, oh my God, you have to go union. As soon as you go union, your money is going to be so much better. You're killing it right now. My non-union agent at that time, after I signed with them, I started working with them in 2008. And this was 2011 or 12. And again, I'm sorry, I'm just going to sound like just an asswipe, but they called me Mortgage. They just called me Hey, Mortgage, you've got an audition tomorrow.
I'm not surprised, actually, at that, Shell.
Meanwhile, I'm like, how come y'all call me Mortgage? I was like, why is this? And they were like, honey, you're our maker. You're the maker. You're the
bank.
You're the one that
you're
the
paying
guarantee.
the bills. You're paying the bills.
Yeah, they're like, you're the guarantee. We're going to get you out. You got to go out on every audition. And so anyway, so meanwhile, I have this management company come in and they go, well, you've got to go union. You got to go union. And I wasn't a must join. I was almost becoming a must join. I had enough Taft-Hartleys for the union to almost join. And if I booked one more Taft-Hartley waiver to join that's how you get into the union. You got to book a bunch of union gigs until you become a regular booker. And then that's when they invite you to join. You can't just step up to the union and join it, by the way.
Right.
And I had made 3 Taft-Hartleys. I was on the fence of being a must join. I booked another union gig. And my management was like, do it, grab it. And I did. You pay the $3,600 to join, and then watch your phone stop ringing, because nobody thought through the part where I had a non-union agent, not a union agent, a non-union agent who every so often would get me a union audition, and I'd do it and book it and grab another Taft-Hartley.
Wow.
So then I booked the 4th one, and they were like, do it. And that was at the beginning of that year. That was February, March. I became a union member. And by May, I was like, so I'm running out of money and my phone's not ringing. What the hell do I do? And your hands are tied. You've tied your hands now. You can't audition for anything non-union. And so
how do you get out of that situation? I'm sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, it's a nightmare. And the only way to get out of that situation is to get signed with a union agency. That's it.
Right.
Or you go to the union. There's 2 ways, and that's the first. The other way is you become FICOR, which means that you go to the union and you say, I want to not be a full SAG member. I want to be a mostly SAG member, and disallow you guys to punish me if I do anything non-union. I want to be able to legally do union and or non-union jobs at my discretion. And they take away your card. They take away your right to vote. They stop sending you DVDs at the end of the year. And
that's not worth it then.
No. But then, and here's what happened. During that time between when I decided to go FICOR, because I did not have a union agent, in between the time of going union and finally becoming FICOR, was about 7 or 8 months. And I was tapped. I was like running out of all of my funds. I was living by myself at the time. I was broken up. I was at the end of like, I had just gotten, like, I was such a kid when I got married, and then it wasn't working out. And I decided to go out on my own and like end it and leave him everything to prove that like I was in it for love, not your money. And I left him everything, including our $1 million apartment on the Upper East Side, everything, and went fucking broke in West Harlem, where I moved to, where I was like, oh my God, what do I do? And so when I was pushed to that ultimate brink, and all of that's true, and like we had a pretty amiable, like a nice enough divorce. Like I didn't take him for a ride at all. I left him everything, and it shattered my world into a point of like, I'm so screwed. I better figure something out right now. And what happened was a combination of going FICOR and also my non-union agent in the meanwhile saying, well, listen, since you can't audition right now, before I went FICOR, since you can't audition right now, do you think maybe you could train the other talent so that we at least have a booker?
Interesting.
Right.
And I said, no, like I'm the star. No, I don't want to coach. Like, forget it. And they somehow talked me into it. And after I had coached a few different people a few different times, I was like, maybe I'll do a class. And I did a class. And at the class began, the first person, I had no plan for this class. First person walked in front of the mic and started talking. And I went, that's what you do when you audition? That was the first thing I said in the first class I taught was, that's what you do. And then I went, okay, everybody, get ready to take some notes. And that's how it started. And now I have a whole, like, actual, it's so structured so that anybody can really truly learn. And there's a step-by-step thing. But anyway, I went FICOR. I finally decided to become FICOR. And that's a pill to swallow at first, but now you realize it's the smartest thing you could ever do. And the very first non-union audition that I went to when I went FICOR had a buyout of $18,000.
Oh, wow.
And I walked in with like blood in my eyes. You guys, I was so broke at this point. Wow. And I was so starved of auditioning of not being called to audition for like 8 months straight. And then just like randomly coaching here and there. And I was like, I'm back. I was like, I'm back in the game. And I go and I auditioned for this Le'Veon Chocolate Diamonds commercial and snagged it. It was done.
There you go.
How many years ago was this?
This was like it's 2011, I think, or 12.
So 2011,
12,
you
yeah.
break not back in, but you reestablish yourself, and it sounds like you're building out a practice at exactly the same time.
At the exact same time, and so I got back in the game, and my classes started to sort of take off. Like within 3 months, I think I had a wait list, and I was like, this is crazy. Like maybe I should go a little more. Like maybe people are really getting something from it. But like it just took off. And getting back in front of the mic also took off. And being a coach and a director, while also being a voice artist regularly behind the mic, these things were secular. Like they fed each other. And it was like the phoenix rising from the disaster of a divorce where I was like, oh, I don't need any money. Like, what the fuck? You know, but that was the phoenix rising where it was like, nope, I'm going to do this all on my own through my arts experience and expertise in this. And I'm going to like take the ball and fucking run with it.
Wow. So, you know, as we look at this journey of, you know, learning as a kid and, you know, hanging in there and, you know, the improv and coming to New York and the breaks and the hustling and all this stuff, like with the students that you have, which I imagine range in ages, like what is your advice to people who want to break into this business?
If you asked me this a few years ago, my answer would have been completely different. But this answer is very fresh and very new because we have a very fresh, very new, very different industry now than we did before COVID. And so now the answer is get a mentor or a coach. Really, truly, 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 you have to know what you're doing. You've got to get the right equipment, and you don't need to spend a fortune. And if anybody here is looking for free tips, please just go to the website and absorb the information that's there. It's nycvocoach.com, because I filled it with things that people can learn from, even if they're just browsing.
Yeah.
There's so much information on the site, including a page called Recommendations, where I'll show you how to set up an absolutely gorgeous studio, identical to the one I'm working on now, for less than $500.
Oh, wow.
Get your equipment, get to learn your equipment, learn how to work your equipment to work for you. And then know where you're going to audition, have an audition strategy and a momentum strategy, and lay out a career plan, and you knock it out step by step.
Interesting. What's that website again, Shelly?
Oh, me, I am at nycvocoach.com.
And I'm sure Larry... I'm sorry.
I train people all over the world, but I wanted NYC in the name. I just did.
Hey, there's nothing more credible when it comes to acting, et cetera, than NYC. And I'm sure... Larry Shea, you can give a wonderful recommendation to anybody out there listening.
Ringing endorsement, for sure. Yeah, I mean, Shelly, I always marveled at your work and what you do, and we could talk to you all day. So just amazing stuff. We can't thank you enough, really.
Thank you so much for having me here to just brag.
It's worth it. It's worth it.
No, it's well worth it. What are you talking about?
It's really not. It's really not. It just feels like, I feel like, oh my gosh, it's humbling, but it's also so fun to tell the story, really, because it's not bragging when you think about how many times I was broken eating shit the whole time, and like,
absolutely, you got to keep picking yourself back up. You should be proud of that.
And that's exactly right. And so it's really really just the story of making it work. And I believe that if you have intention and you know what you want, your life will make way for it, even whether or not you even begin taking action. Like if you just start thinking about voiceover stuff, pretty soon voiceover topics are going to pop into your life. And then you might start searching for stuff, and then more and more voiceover stuff will come into your life, whether it's voiceover, baking, soccer, law practice, whatever it is that you are intending to do it well and learn how to do it right. Don't waste time guessing.
Great advice.
Well, Shelly, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you guys. That was so much fun to talk to all the Larrys. Tushar, you were pretty cool too.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
I don't want you to. You're just you're hanging in there, and I support you.
I thank you.
He needs it.
That's basically what this show's all about. Just trying to support me.
Excellent.
Thanks, Shelly.
Yeah, thanks you guys.
Well, that was a conversation that lived up to all of my expectations. I hope that all of you agree. What an incredibly interesting person, and I guess a great example of always say yes when asked a question. Just what great stories.
Real quick, we did learn one thing. She is not from Sheboygan. That is disappointing.
Disappointing. Shelly Shenoy, not from Sheboygan.
That would have been great.
That is great. So many lessons here. I mean, I found some of the most fascinating stuff. Yes, fake it until you make it was used a lot, right? I mean, that's like a major theme in Shelly's career path, which, man, it works, fake it till you make it. But the waitressing story about I'm the best waitress because I'm so fast. And she's just like literally, doing what she did at the dining room table growing up, So that was fascinating. But, she gave up everything too. She really, I don't know, took 10 steps back to go 20 steps forward. She gave up everything except her name, which is gold.
There you go.
but just the importance of the waitressing job too, that she needed to stay in New York so that she could follow her dream. And she didn't even think about her dream for like a year, before she started getting back into it and allowing herself to dream big. And sometimes it's that one pivotal moment that allows you to stay where you need to be to then push forward to achieve your dreams. She could have easily not gotten that job that day and been forced back to whatever, Provo, Utah, or Ohio, or wherever her family was at the moment. So I just found her stick-to-itiveness fascinating, her determination, her strength, her courage. I mean, the whole story is just gold.
I mean, sometimes you gotta say to yourself, I'm going to dig my heels in here, and this is where the line is, and I'm going to move forward from this point. But I will say this: never disregard your life experience, right? So with her training did not start in classes or whatever. It started around her dining room table with her family, with her brothers, and that's how she built her comedic chops, making her brothers and her family laugh. And that is how and let's be honest, that's really what built her career in some senses, because when you're a kid, you love to cut up, you love to make goofy voices, you love to do all that stuff, but you always realize at some point the kid stuff goes away. And it really helps when when you're in your 20s and your 30s and you say, you know what, I still have to be that kind of a goofball, and I can still now harken back to those moments when I was a kid trying to make my brothers laugh at the kitchen table. That is awesome.
No question. I mean, she's built for this, right? We talked about it in the interview. Like, she's literally built for this because of the training at the table. Then she impersonates a teacher or goes and teaches kids, but learns how to direct kids. And that ultimately comes back to that booth moment where she could direct, and knock it out of the park. I mean, literally one thing leading to another to create the moment of genius. And let's not mistake anything. Shelly, in my mind, is a vocal creative genius because she could do things with her voice creatively that I can't do, that most mortal people can't do. So a high level of respect. She's very talented, very gifted, very determined, and nobody works harder.
Yeah, and for me, one of the things that really stuck is the eternal optimism that she has. When you look back at her journey, being a kid and hanging in there and moving from one school to the next, she found a way to figure it out. She found a way to fit in. She found a sense of purpose, and she remained positive and optimistic throughout all of that. When you look at the Weber State experience that didn't pan out, she figured out a way to work with that and to keep going.
That would have
she
crushed
came to
a
New
lot
York.
of
She didn't
people,
have the cash. There were so many of these moments throughout this story where she could have said, all right, you know what? Enough. I'm going to pivot this way. I'm going to pivot that way. I'm going to take an easier path. But not for one moment did she consider doing that. And even, the story about the union agent and losing work and everything else, she just kept picking herself up. She kept believing. She kept going. And look at where she is today. Everything came together and worked out.
Yeah, and I would also say she's not kidding when she says, use my resources because they're all there for you to learn. We know people are listening to this podcast right now who want to be voiceover artists. Go to her website, nycvocoach.com, because all sorts of questions are answered there. All sorts of information is given there, and it's gold. So if you don't go get it, shame on you.
Exactly right. So with that, Shelly, thank you so much for joining this episode of No Wrong Choices. We also thank you for joining us. Please be sure to give us a 5-star rating and follow along on your podcasting platform if you like what you heard. We also encourage you to join the conversation by visiting our website at NoWrongChoices.com and by following us on social media by searching for No Wrong Choices. On behalf of Tushar Saxena and Larry Shea, I'm Larry Samuels. Thanks again for joining us. Never forget, there are no wrong choices on the road to success. We learn from every experience.